We've all had what I like to call a moment, an existential moment. No one's been exempt from this, right? And executives are also people, of course. So we've been looking at our lives, our work lives, and wondering whether where we are is where we either want to be or should be or need to be. And at times been looking far more expansively at our options than we ever have before. I'm one of them, certainly. And I'm wondering what your experience has been like so far, Joel, working with organizations as well as executives, both inside them and wanting to get inside them. For example, have you noticed that executives are far more open to possibilities of relocation or different industries, or kind of looking more broadly at everything and wondering where they might make the greatest difference? What's been your experience so far?
I think as people, because we're talking about humans and people, as individuals get, uh, let's say, into the middle of their career, what we've begun to see more and more of, it was unusual before, but not so unusual now. It's not quite common yet. It's individuals taking stock of their lives and asking themselves, I've climbed the ladder. I've given up quite a lot to do that. Is this what I want to do with the rest of my life? And sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't. For those that haven't, there's an individual who's a former very senior and well-known investment banker. He and his wife have opened he quit Wall Street, very top of his profession. You'd know the name if I mentioned it. And he's currently running a bed and breakfast in the Northeast. There's an individual who I know now is a plumber. I didn't know his background. He has an advanced degree from Wharton. He worked at private equity, something he didn't want to do anymore. Did a succession project for a CEO role a few years ago where we started with 10 candidates, all internal, came down to 3. One of the 3 called me on a weekend. It's a 2-year process. And he said to me, I don't want to be in the process any longer. He was probably one of the final 2. He was very much at the top of his career. And had almost been astronomical in his career in terms of steps. And I said to him, well, Jim, what is it? What's driving you to this? And as you know, you get to know these candidates if you go through our kind of process for a couple of years. And I had no sense of this, even as well as I knew him. He said, I have a teaching certificate. I always wanted to be a teacher. This isn't really what I want to do. Okay, he's now teaching school. Okay? So you're seeing people make these adjustments. As I said, it's not quite common, but you see it more than you used to. For people who want to make, stay in the corporate world, but want something altogether different. Maybe it's moving from a major corporation to a mid-cap, or they want to be an entrepreneur or whatever. You begin to understand what that means. If you're one of those, you have to understand what it means and what its implications are. Okay, and that's where you use that network I was talking about. And you ask them questions. Say, have you met people who've done something like this before? You may or may not do it, but I'm just trying to gather some information and some insights, so that you begin to build a knowledge base of what fits for you at this point in life. We've seen over the last few, I'd say months, probably a year to year and a half at most, the impact of working at home. Okay. Sometimes it's difficult. We're talking about relocation. Well, it's dislocation in many respects. People are working at home and they don't want to go back to the office. Many don't. Why? Because what's the commute? An hour each way? Well, that's 2 hours of productivity, or 2 hours every day I'm taking away from my family. That's one day. That's basically 1 day a week, one work day a week, sitting in an automobile, maybe talking on a Bluetooth, but sitting in an automobile. People are finding that as these mechanisms, the videos become more effective, that they can do their work or lead teams or whatever. Now, it's not as effective as you and I, Tony, is sitting in a room or with all of your guests. You don't see the whites of people's eyes, so to speak. But in the end of the day, we're all going through these kinds of adjustments. And it isn't uncommon for people to think about making these adjustments in life that really fits them. And one more story I can tell you, this is a guy who was in succession to be one of 3 possible CEO candidates for, it's a New York Stock Exchange company, internal candidates. He's running their largest division, an individual in his mid 40s, on his way, you know, he was the youngest of them and probably had the longest runway. He said, called me and he said, I've decided to leave. He said, I'm losing my family. My kids are growing up. I'm never home. It's nothing that I really signed up for. It's just that everything seemed to kind of move up. And, you know, I have my career aspirations. The sad story about this is that he did leave. And you know, obviously he had some resources. So he bought a couple of silk printing franchises. So his kids could work there after school. Okay. Called me about a year later. I'd seen him in between. His name was Tim. And he said, I need you to take me off of your CEO list where we send out some things. You've seen some of the things we write, Tony. And I said, well, did I offend you? He said, no. He said, you know, unfortunately, you don't know. I said, no. He said, unfortunately, I have a pancreatic cancer. And he said, what I'm trying to do now, he's 47 years old. He said, well, I'm just trying to stay alive until my youngest one graduates high school next June. And he didn't make it. Okay. The point is, if you're going to make a change in life, don't just talk about it. Do your research, talk to people, think about it, and try and figure out where you are at your point in life, what really matters to you before you make that change, so that you make the right change, whether it's corporate America or elsewhere.
Mhm.
I can also tell you, at Emory University, where I've been associated for some time, they have an executive MBA program. And I was talking to the head of that a couple of years ago. He told, and those are the people that come in on a weekend, every second or third weekend. So they're not there every day. They have jobs. And he was telling me 2/3 to 75% of the students in that current class, this is 2 years ago, before COVID, were physicians. Okay. Looking basically not to practice medicine or to get a business background so that they could maybe go in a different direction. So this is what you're talking about is not uncommon. Okay. It's not uncommon. What becomes the glue is individuals sitting in a chair saying, you know, I should have thought about it. Maybe I should have, maybe I could have, maybe I should have talked to this person. Why would they talk to me? Have courage and have those conversations.